The time is just gone 8:42 a.m. as we continue with our broadcast this morning and looking at where we are in South Africa. And we know service delivery protests are a daily occurrence in this country, but always accompanying these service delivery protests, sometimes or in many on many occasions, we find that it is accompanied by violence, those that are opportunistic, and also the whole question surrounding looting. We know what has happened in the past, and this is a threat that still looms all the time. Joining us this morning is Mohammed Batman Ismail, eThekwini Secure. Mohammed, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Alhamdulillah. I always like the way you introduce me. Mohammed Batman is. Thank you for that.
Well,
That's very, very
your
important.
name is on there. Batman is on there on the screen. As so, I've got to address you.
That's
The way
fine.
you need to be addressed. But Mohammed, let's talk about these service delivery protests. And yesterday we've seen out here in the Gauteng region. I see that something's going on in Soweto again this morning. But this constant threat of violence, of looting, when these service delivery protests take place are always there, and also at the same time, we've become so accustomed to this to the extent that this is actually embedded in our minds.
Mm, mm. Well, looting, sorry, before I say talk about looting, protests in South Africa is the norm. It must be expected. It's going to happen at any given time. In the past, we knew as we approached elections, it was intensifying. But now it seems that protests are happening anytime, anywhere, for whatever reason it is happening for. So the question is why the protesters, who's behind the protest? Are people protesting for specific things? Yes, they are. Are they protesting for service delivery? Yes, they are. Inflation, the high cost of petrol, yes, they are. But is there sort of a formalization when it comes to the protests? Are we doing it correctly, or are we not doing it correctly? We need to explore that at some point in time. And then the issue about looting. July last year, June and July, sometime last year, it was extremely. I think it was devastating. It finished the country to such an extent that eThekwini municipality, for one, is still recovering from looting, aggravated by the fact that COVID had a hell of an impact in terms of the finances and the economy of, excuse me, of the eThekwini municipality. Now, looting is always a threat. It's looming there because we had to take lessons from the last time, and we need to understand what played or what were the factors behind it and where it's going to lead us to. So, is there going to be looting every single time when a protest happens? Yes or no? We don't know. We don't have the answers to that, but there is a possibility. But again, we are reactive as a community. We worry first, and then we send out messages on social media platforms. Whether looting is happening or not, we're going to say they're going to start looting, and then that exaggerates the situation. However, lessons were learned. South African police services, Metro Police, and the like security companies, community police forums are always on alert, and they have a plan of action. So if a protest starts, we're going to be ready to see to it that there is not going to be any looting that is accompanying the protests. But communities themselves must understand the dynamics of service delivery issues in South Africa, the dynamics of why people protest, and what do they want to achieve. That is very, very important. The dynamics need to be unpacked. You must remember way back before the national elections, the first democratic elections in the country, we were replete with protests. But those protests were different. Those protests were about freedom. And now we came into the freedom of a particular country after being in apartheid for years and years and years. And now people suddenly thought we were in utopia. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case. And this is where they say, look, the government is failing, they're not providing, but the dynamics have changed. It's intricate, it's absolutely intricate. And I can tell you how intricate it is because we sit in council and we know what's going on there. So these are the factors that need to be unpacked as we go along.
Yes. Now, Mohammed, as you mentioned, this is going to be a norm. It's not going to stop, and it's going to be a daily occurrence. The key issue here is how much intelligence have we actually built around managing these type of protests? Because we can't have a situation where every time a protest and there's something turns violent, and looting takes place, and shop windows are broken and people are threatened. And I'm sure at some point in time Yes, people have the right to protest, but it's also got to be managed, and the intelligence is absolutely important. In assisting this process going forward, but also making sure that we don't have the type of behavior we see at these protests.
Yeah, look, intelligence is an intelligent word in that respect, And when I did a Salam Media show a few years ago, when we spoke about the protests, and that I raised that question: what about the intelligence? And one of the guests said, "Where is the intelligence?" There was absolutely no intelligence. That if there was, the state security agency didn't act on the intelligence. But there is intelligence somewhere, and they're always looking at things. But how is this intelligence then filtered out into to the South African Police Service and other security sort of authorities? Where is that, and how is that? But you must remember, intelligence is a very intricate thing, and you have to have, and it comes back down to informers. It comes back down to information collectors, where they need to start looking and start filtering through the noise that's wherever it might be, whether it might be in informal settlements, whether it might be in settled communities, or on the street. If somebody's saying something that you might pick up and you might be able to filter through. Are we good at gathering intelligence as South Africans? Is the state security agency good enough in gathering this intelligence to stop these things before it happens? I can't answer that, but we would like to think that they are doing their job. But you must remember, state security agencies themselves have been replete with scandals over the years. So who's doing what, or are we just sitting back and waiting and for things to happen? Because something, you must remember this, that you always feel a lull. There's a particular time when there's a call that comes out for protests or for shutdowns. There's always a lull. There's something happens in the community. You'd find that people tend to go a little bit more quiet in certain areas, and suddenly it just explodes. How do we determine that? That's what we need to do. How do we determine that? And how do we know what are the signs, what are the factors that's going to contribute to this rise in protests? And with that, is there going to be looting? Either, like last night, a car was burnt, not very far from where we are, an Alpine in Amgeni Road. A car was burnt. People came out in I wouldn't say hundreds, but they came out in their numbers. It was quelled because the authorities were there, and it stopped. After that, there were some reports of elsewhere, but very, very quelled, very quiet, nothing that was substantial. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's a sign for worse things to come. We can't answer those questions, and that's where the intelligence should be embedded, where we know what's going to happen next, or we should anticipate, or we should go back in history and analyze patterns and bring it forward and say, listen, station commander, metro police commander, whoever you are, this is what we are looking at. This is what we feel as a community, and this is how our communities are vulnerable. Because if you take a particular ward, for example, in IT, you'd find that the ward is also divided along a hierarchy of financial. What is the word? I can't think of the word, but there are people who the haves and the have-nots. So who's really protesting? It's the have-nots that's protesting. So you'd find in a particular ward, you'd have informal settlements, and around it, you'd find settled communities where the affluent lives. Things don't affect them because they can afford. They can afford what they need to do. If they don't have water, they can go and buy bottles and liters of water. But people living in informal settlements don't have that luxury, and they are dependent on organizations who will help them. So they are frustrated and say, enough is enough. We need better. We need the government to do what we need to do. And that's where, we would say that the state is failing the people, unfortunately. And the ANC was caught with their pants down in 1994. They didn't expect this to explode the way it has moving forward so many years into democracy.
Well, certainly, and also I think one needs to be aware of those that are opportunists and the opportunistic behavior of some to take advantage of these protests and the mayhem, and the carnage that actually accompanies these protests.
You just reminded me of a beautiful term that was always in play in the early days. It was called the third force. So is there a third force behind it? If it is a third force, who is the third force? And why do we keep using the term the third force? Who are these people? We need to break away from these things, and we need to be honest with ourselves. It's not the third force, but the people themselves, or you get an instigator from wherever and however it is. Because there was a big call for a shutdown yesterday. It didn't happen. Some areas had a small protest. Durban had something small. But are people listening? Are they just tired of protests? Is there just a small group of people carrying on with this as they go along? And again, I'm going to use the word. We need to unpack this. So, who are the people who are protesting? Are these the ones who have jobs, or are these the ones who don't have jobs, or is it a collective of both? And in which direction is this going to? And how do we carry out protests as we move forward? Does it have to be mayhem, destruction, looting, or do we look at and does it always have to be violent, or can we go the passive route? Do you get results? It's like a petition. It's like a memorandum. You can get 1 million signatures and give it to the state president, and he's got a drawer there. And I tell you, if you go in his office, you'll find a drawer there. It's called Drawer X, where all those protests, all those memorandums, and all those letters of whatever you want to call them is all in there. Where does it go to? It has zero effect. So you need to be, I think, more sort of holistic in an approach in wanting the government to listen to you. And how do we do that? When you want to have a shutdown, and please don't, I'm not advising anybody to do this. We're looking at the concept of how to do things, because other countries, people will stay at home for days. Nobody does anyway, go anyway, businesses shut down, and then you feel the effects of that. That is a passive protest, and it can work well as opposed to looting, burning cars, destroying businesses. And at the end of the day, who suffers? Because you must remember, same people who would want to be part of the protest might lose their jobs. You've got nothing to go to afterwards if you burn down a business. What do you do? So you're caught in a catch-22 situation at the end of the day. And how do you get the government to listen, to say enough is enough? We cannot sustain a petrol price increase one after the other from 150 to 550, for example. We can't do that. Bread was once 9 rand. It's now 15, 16 rand in the stores. How do you afford it? What is the price of milk? How do you afford it? How do you live if you're only earning 3,500 rand a month? What do the people do? They are tired, they are frustrated, they are fed up. And we have these resultant protests, which gets worse and worse and more violent by the day as we continue through our lives.
Well, Mohammed, Jazakallah for that and for your time with us this morning. And obviously, looking forward to further engagements going back in the future. I see, obviously, you still having your breakfast. Enjoy your breakfast, and inshallah,
Jazakallah.
we'll
Thank you
talk
very
at some
much indeed.
point. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Appreciate it.
Mohammed Batman Ismail with us this morning. eThekwini Secure. The time is just gone 8:55. We're going to go for a break, and we'll be back.